So last week I was gone. I was picking up Meg from Waco. So Robert did something on Philippians and Acts is what I heard. Which means it's now been 2 weeks since we've talked about Hebrews, and I remember that we finished kind of Hebrews 7-ish, Hebrews 8-ish. I don't exactly remember like the precise verse that we left off. My sense was that it was about kind of middle of 7, and I kind of was gesturing toward 8:4 as to how 8:4, contextualized the rest of 7. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. All right. I feel like Abby takes really good notes, so is there anything I already missed or covered? Okay. So at this point, at this point in the author's argument, he's making the big comparison, right, between Jesus qua Melchizedekian priest over against the Levitical priests, and he's making lots of different comparisons. There are comparisons about the nature of the Levitical priests. They are the Levitical priests are mortal. They are, he says, weak. A subset of their mortality. Also, that they are appointed on the basis of genealogy, right? You become a Levitical priest not because you take the honor for yourself or whatever, but because of genealogy, right? So it's a genealogical inheritance. And that they were numerous, and that interestingly, he describes the fact of their being numerous as a subset again of their mortality. There had to be lots of them because they kept dying. There couldn't just be one, because if there were just one and that were it, well then when he died, the people on whose behalf he mediated would be toast. All right, because then they have no mediator, intercessor, etc. So there had to be lots of them because they keep dying. Also, they had to offer sacrifices both for themselves and for the people, and they had to do it with regularity. They do it every year. Yeah.
So is that just the head priest, or all priests were Levitical?
All of the priests that work in the Jerusalem temple, the earthly tabernacle, were from the tribe of Levi.
Sadducees and Pharisees, they were all Levites.
No, you don't have to be a Pharisee. Those are just, for lack of a better word, political parties. Okay. You could be a Sadducee and be a priest. You could be a Pharisee and be a priest. In the sense that, again, Pharisees and Sadducees are just...
You could be a banker and be a Sadducee or Pharisee, so you don't have to be a priest at all?
Correct. Yeah. Most, theoretically, it could be the case, I don't think it is necessarily the case historically, but it could be the case that no Pharisees were priests. Okay. Because they're just, it's a voluntary group party that you join because you like their whatever social political ideals, right? And again, importantly, recall that again this is a tangent, but just by way of reminder, there it's easy to conflate, right, sort of Jews and Judaism with the Pharisees or whatever, but the Pharisees make up 0.5% of the population. There are about 5,000 Pharisees. As far as we know, I mean, this is a good estimate, and it's based on a number that Josephus gives us about. He gives that number. So even at a conservative estimate, if the number of Jews was about 500,000, that's the conservative estimate. Some have estimated up to 1.5 million. Even on the conservative estimate, they're at most 0.5% of the population. So there's not like they're this massive, enterprise going around just controlling everybody.
You know about them because they were mouthy, huh?
Yeah, because a lot of people didn't like them, and so they wrote about them, right? So you get them talked about. They were politically. It's not. Of course, it can be the case that a small number of people have a lot of power.
Sure.
Right? That seems familiar. But like Elon Musk is 0.000000001% of the population, but he controls a lot of talking points. And so, the Pharisees in the 2nd century BC had a bit of political power and control. They were tight with the new queen, and she kind of enforced their policies. And so, and they were popular with the masses. I mean, they were effectively a populist group. They were effective with the masses because they were trying to make Torah observance doable for everybody. And so they did try to spread their teachings, but and they were successful to some degree. But then what, of course, happens is other rival Jewish teachers, because of the attention that the Pharisees are getting, they start to create their own, teaching enterprises and rulings and to combat them. So you get in the Dead Sea Scrolls, you get the Essenes. It's probably the Essenes out in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Again, another small group, could be 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 people out there, which again, another 0.5% of the population. And they think the Pharisees are like the problem. They think the Pharisees are transgressive, they lead the people astray, they don't know anything about the law, they're too lenient, all that sort of stuff.
And they don't have to be Levites.
No. Mm-mm. Incidentally, lots of Essenes probably were priests, but that's because this movement started as a rebellion against the way the Jerusalem temple was being handled. So incidentally, lots of Essenes may have been priests, but that's, again, not because it was a requirement, it's just because that's where the movement started, as sort of like a rebellion within or against the way the Jerusalem temple was being handled, which is something that priests would know about. So a lot of Essenes probably were priests, but it wasn't a requirement by any means.
What were the Sadducees?
They were an aristocratic. We don't know a ton about the Sadducees. From what we do know, they were another group. Incidentally, probably a bit more aristocratic, probably based in Jerusalem, probably had a bit more control over, at the time, at least in the 1st century, a bit more control over the Jerusalem temple and its regulation, like how it functioned. And probably had a presence in what they call the Sanhedrin, the council that decided cases in Jerusalem.
So the Sanhedrin was Levites?
No, the Sanhedrin was just a council, like a Congress. Okay. And you could be, you didn't have to be one thing or another to become part of the Sanhedrin.
They were more rigid?
The Sadducees? They more rigid than the Pharisees, yeah, on certain issues. Again, rigid and lax depends on the issue you're talking about. If you're talking about certain issues of ritual purity, the Pharisees were a bit more lenient. I know that sounds odd because you'd think they're the ones that are strict on ritual purity. They were in some respects, but much looser in others. It's because ritual purity is not one thing, it's 15 things. So they could be rigid on one issue and lax on another.
Wasn't one of their main differences the resurrection?
Yeah, so one of the big distinctions between the Sadducees and other groups was the Sadducees only held the first 5 books, Genesis through Deuteronomy, as authoritative. The prophets and the writings, etc., they didn't regard as authoritative, what we would call authoritative scripture. And they were a bit more, I don't mean this negatively, but like biblicist in the sense that unless they followed the law according to what the law said, not according to its sort of common interpretation or something like that, right? And so that led to some more rigidness for some obvious reasons. For example, again, the one I come up with a lot is the issue of corpse impurity, right? Like if Leviticus 11 says that if a carcass falls in your drink, it's impure, but that's all it says. It doesn't say the carcass of what, right? A carcass of one of these swarming things. Well, technically a gnat falls under that category, right? And so if gnats fall in your drink, well, now according to Leviticus 11, the whole thing's impure. And the Pharisees were like, well, that seems unreasonable. We can't control gnats. So strain out a gnat. You can strain out a gnat. Whereas the Sadducees, we don't know this for certain. It's just a good example of the kind of thing that they would probably disagree with. Would say, no, the text says a carcass. That gnat's a carcass, so therefore, gnats apply. So yeah, if a gnat falls in your drink, that's it. That's a good example of an area where the Pharisees are lax And the text says carcass, but they realized that like if you called a gnat carcass a carcass, it would just be an unlivable law. And so they follow the law, but they say that it's only enforceable if the carcass is the size of a lintel or bigger. So like basically like a horsefly. So gnats don't count. So you can strain out gnats. Whereas the Sadducees might say, no, that's it. The text says carcass, so, right. It's a bit more biblicist, bit more literal, right? And in this case, a bit more rigid.
But what kind of carcass could fall into your drink that was larger than a gnat or a fly?
Like a rat,
Gecko,
A cow?
a gecko,
a rat.
Okay.
yeah, a small gecko, yeah. A horsefly would count. Yeah, a big fly would count. Even the Pharisees would say, yep, that counts. Sorry, you got to throw that out there. Yeah.
So did that include like ritual purity water as well? Versus drink?
Ritual purity water's slightly different because it depends on whether it's running water, like an ocean or a sea or a river, or whether it's a cistern.
Jesus had.
And then it depends on whether the cistern is filled with water that came from a living stream or whether it's just water that was pooled and collected. Lots of different, a bit far afield from Hebrews 7, but it's the kinds of debates that they were having. Because, again, the text just doesn't say. The text doesn't tell you can a ritual purity bath become impure. So you have to extrapolate. You have to get to that conclusion by reading with the grain of the text and making conclusions based on other texts.
Sadducees also didn't believe in angels, right?
Yeah, Sadducees tended not to believe in what we would now call sort of like supernatural stuff, besides God, right? You're like, well, there's God, and then there's humans.
Not in the text that they believed in?
Yeah, it's tough. It's interesting. I'm not sure quite. It's not. I don't even know if it's necessarily they didn't believe in angels because the text itself would have mentioned angels, like particularly Genesis, the Torah. But it's more about like the immortality of the soul. They thought that your soul, if you had one, it was just a mortal thing that God put in there and it died with you. And when you died, you were dead. And that was it. There's no so yeah, they don't believe in a resurrection. And they didn't think the Torah taught anything about resurrection. Yeah. So you got all these different groups, Essenes, Pharisees, Sadducees, Jesus followers, who are all coming up with distinctive interpretations of Torah and the way to live obediently according to God's requirements. Jesus is kind of interesting because he's not really like a centrist in the sense that, he's in the middle. There are some regulations where his opinion aligns exactly with what we find in the Essene group, who are quite rigid. And then in some cases, his opinion aligns with what we see in some Pharisaic schools. He almost never agrees with the Sadducees. Yeah. So all of this was to say that to the original question about Levites, priests to be a priest in the earthly Jerusalem temple, you had to be a Levite. Or to work in the temple, you had to be a Levite. To be an actual priest, you had to be a son of Aaron, and Aaron's a Levite. The point is that you only became a priest in the earthly Jerusalem temple if you were genealogically a Levite. And so these are the distinctions he's making that, Christ is a priest according to the order of Melchizedek, and Melchizedek's priesthood is not based on genealogy. And the author infers this from Genesis 14, because he reads Genesis 14 and he sees that, Abraham went and paid tithes to Melchizedek, and Melchizedek is without father, mother, without genealogy, without end of days or beginning of life. And so that's what the author of Hebrews says about Melchizedek, implying that his priesthood is some sort of perpetual celestial priesthood. He is he's a created being, but he's still some sort of spiritual celestial being, because he infers from that he's not included in any genealogy. So he's not a normal mortal, is right what he infers, is what the author of Hebrews infers about Melchizedek based on the fact that he doesn't have a genealogy, right? So now notice, that means then that if he doesn't have a genealogy, then he's a priest not based on genealogy, right? So his priesthood is not all those things. He's a person without beginning of days or end of life, so he's some sort of celestial immortal being. Because he's immortal, he's not weak. He doesn't perish. He himself doesn't even have a genealogy, so apparently his priesthood isn't based on genealogy, right? So then the author says that Jesus became a priest according to this order. He became a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. And it's because, he's able to say this because he distinguishes between the heavenly temple and the earthly one. The Levitical priests run this one. They're the ones who offer the gifts in the earthly temple according to the law. And so, in other words, the law legislates for the Levitical priests and their, what is the word I'm looking for? I'm trying to say their reign. Their territory, their legitimate territory is the earthly temple, not the heavenly one, right? But his point is Christ is not a priest in this temple. He is a priest in this temple. And therefore, he does not have to, he transcends a lot of these categories. Christ has been resurrected, so now he's no longer mortal. He is resurrected, so he doesn't have a weak body. And because he's resurrected, he'll never die again, which means it doesn't have to be lots of them. He can just be the one high priest up there, and since he's never going to die again, there don't have to be numerous of him. And because he is like Melchizedek in that he's now resurrected, the fact that his priesthood is not based on genealogy.
So is Melchizedek, he has no progeny. What is his genesis? Where does he come from?
Yeah, the text doesn't say. It seems to have been inferred by both the author of Hebrews and a text in the Dead Sea Scrolls called 11Q Melchizedek, that he's just a created immortal being.
Created by whom?
God, yeah. That God created spiritual beings like angels, so that he's some sort of angelic figure.
So would the Sadducees have believed that?
They would have probably not. No, they probably would. They would have affirmed that Melchizedek exists because he's in Genesis 14.
They didn't believe he was without father, mother, and with.
Yeah, it's tough to know because we don't have Sadducees. I don't think we have any Sadducean writings. Only thing we know about Sadducees is what Josephus tells us, and a few points in like Acts.
So the only reason it would matter to me what they believe about him is how it relates to what they believe about Jesus. So if they didn't believe that he could have been,
Oh, the Sadducees certainly wouldn't have believed anything the author of Hebrews is saying. Yeah. Because they don't think anything. They don't unless they happen to had become converted.
I'm always trying to wrap my head around how they could have rejected Jesus. That's because it's so obvious to me.
Yeah. I think it's only obvious with hindsight. That's one of the big points is that, even his own disciples didn't think it was obvious. Right? One of my favorite, an Eastern Orthodox theologian came to St. Andrews and said, do you think if you had been around in the first century, then you would have recognized Jesus as the Son of God? And of course, a lot of us were like very eager to be like, oh, yeah, of course. He goes, okay, good. Then we need to call you an exorcist. Because the only people who recognized Jesus as the Son of God on sight were demons. Right? It's just true. The only people who were like, oh, I know who you are, the Son of God. We know who you are. Please don't destroy us. And Jesus says, be quiet. I'll destroy you later. Even his own disciples were like, they kind of were like, you get insights, right? Like Peter thinks he's the Messiah, but it took him a long time to get there. And even right after his acclamation that he was the Messiah, he said, but you'll never die. Right as he said, I'm the Messiah, Jesus said, you're right, and they're going to kill me. And he's like, no, I'll stop that from happening. So he clearly wasn't all the way there, right? And even after, it took him, this is why the author of Luke Acts tells us that after his resurrection, he just had to stay with them for 40 days to instruct them.
Do we have any known Levitical priests that believed?
Yes, Acts talks about many priests becoming believers. Yeah, it says that several priests became believers in that time. Yeah. And Pharisees became believers. Not all of them, obviously, but some. Yeah. One of them wrote half the New Testament.
Pat and I aren't sure you closed the loop on
Okay.
this.
Yeah, this was.
On this,
I didn't.
no, this is from 2 weeks ago.
Oh, right.
But you closed the loop on this tithe to Melchizedek, but maybe you just did right there. Does that just show his priesthood?
Yes, shows his priesthood and his superiority.
Okay.
Because you pay tithes to the superior party.
Okay.
And so if Levi was in the womb of Abraham, or loins, in the loins of Abraham, which is just ancient biology, right? The notion that like you are in your ancestors. I guess that's modern biology as well. Then if Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek, that implies that actually says, in a manner of speaking, so did Levi. But if Levi paid tithes to Melchizedek in Abraham, then that implies some sort of superiority of Melchizedek over Levi.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it demonstrates his priesthood and his.
Superiority.
Okay.
I only have one more question about that.
Okay. No, that's fine.
Was that a Middle Eastern practice that Abraham just went out and did it? Because it is not mentioned, in fact, in the Thompson Chain Reference Bible.
Yeah.
They don't even put tithe back there.
Right. Good question. Yeah, I don't know. Yes, it is for sure a practice of paying a portion of your stuff to the deity and his officers. In this case, would be the priests, right? So yeah, that's a common practice. How much it is not always the same. We only call it tithe because that's just the word that means 10%, the tenth. So a tithe just means a tenth. In Greek and Hebrew, it's just the word tenth. And so, it was a common practice for people to give a portion of their stuff to the priesthood.
So that was just kind of borrowed from the practice of the time that Abraham.
Presumably, yeah, because he doesn't have like a law that says he needs to do it, and there's no Jerusalem
It's
temple
only
yet.
later that, and even Jacob gave a tithe at Bethel.
Yeah.
He said he would bring it, but then afterwards it's established as,
Yeah, but same as sacrifice. I mean, you
Yeah.
get Noah sacrificing
right.
well before Leviticus, right? It's just because making a sacrifice to a deity was just about the most common thing you did to a cult, to anybody. Yeah, Cain and Abel. Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Fought over
Cain and
it
Abel.
because
Yeah,
he
right.
wanted to give a grain sacrifice and it wasn't worth it.
Right, but precisely. But the point is that like these people are offering sacrifice well before there's any sort of Levitical regulation about it, because offering sacrifice to a deity is just the most common. It's how you express your gratitude toward the deity. You give him a gift,
Right.
or her a gift.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
think about the can of worms. I'm sorry.
I can't find it right now, but is there an implication in 7 that Jesus is a higher priest than Melchizedek?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Because he lived as a human. Is that the reason?
Yeah, that's interesting, because Melchizedek never was one.
He never was.
And he's just a priest. Melchizedek's never called a high priest. He's just a priest, right? And he's a priest of the Most High God, and he's got an order of priesthood, but it doesn't say that he's the high priest, right? Only Christ is the one called the high priest. And so, yeah, it's an interesting and I think a good observation. It may well be that it's because of his humanness that he is exalted, and that's an exegetical derivation from Psalm 8.
Yeah.
He gets from Psalm 8 in, right, go back to Hebrews.
Can't remember where it was in 7 though.
Hebrews, where?
Here it is, 22.
Where he said, oh, there it is. Sorry, Hebrews 2, 5. Hebrews 2, 5. Now God did not subject the coming world, about which we are speaking, to angels, and Melchizedek's an angel, or some sort of spiritual celestial being, right? But someone has testified somewhere, and then he quotes Psalm 8. What are human beings that you were, actually it says, what is the Son of Man that you were mindful of him? Son of Man, probably euphemism for humans. But also it's convenient because Jesus is the Son of Man, sort of individually, right? What is the Son of Man that you're mindful of him? Humans, that you care for them. You made him for a little while lower than the angels, but you've crowned him with glory and honor, subjecting all things under his feet. So in other words, I think it's an exegetical inference from Psalm 8. Psalm 8 says that, okay, human beings are made to be lower than the angels for a little while, but you have crowned them above all things. And the author of Hebrews sees Hebrews 8 as not simply like a general truism about humans, though he'll get there, but as a true statement about the Son of Man, Jesus, who is the one whom God has exalted and crowned and subjected angels to him.
Yeah, here it is in 22. So much.
7:22?
7:22. So much the more also Jesus has become the guarantee
Yeah.
of a better covenant. I don't know what took me off in 7 there, but it seemed like he was making the point that Jesus was higher than Melchizedek, even though he's of the order. That may be it.
Yeah, I think it's, the logic between 7:21 and 22 is not obvious to me. He says this, look at 7:20. This was confirmed with an oath, for others became priests, took their office without an oath, but this one became a priest with an oath because of the one whom said, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind, you are a priest forever. Accordingly, Jesus, and I think the logic is, because you're a priest forever, you can mediate a better covenant. Because the former covenant, because then notice that he then starts to, in 23, compare the former covenant's regulations vis-a-vis its priesthood. And the distinction is, these priests were many in number because they were prevented from death they were prevented by death from continuing in office, but he holds his priesthood forever. So the distinction between the former covenant and the new covenant, and why he can call the new covenant superior, is because it's mediated by one who will never die again. Whereas the former covenant was mediated and managed by people who kept dying. And so there had to be lots of them. And they were subjected to weakness. So they had to offer on behalf of their people, but they participated in the same weakness without ever having overcoming it. Whereas Christ participated in the weakness, but did overcome it.
Yep.
And so on the basis of his superiority in lots of different ways, right? His immortality, and the immortality means he can always be in the divine presence interceding because he always lives to make intercession. And because he's a priest according to the order of Melchizedek, which is a superior priesthood than Levi, which he derives from the fact that Levi paid tithes to Melchizedek, right? All these things.
And having been human, is that?
Possibly, yeah. I think based on Hebrews 2, yeah.
You're saying maybe, but it's not in.
I don't think it's in 7:22,
Okay,
no.
gotcha.
But I think it's in Hebrews 2,
Okay.
5, yeah. Jeff, I saw yours, and then Debbie.
So mine's just maybe a clarifying question.
Okay.
So when it says that Jesus is a priest according to the order of
Yeah.
Melchizedek, is that just somebody we've only heard of one other time?
Yeah.
Is that like the order of Melchizedek? Is that just God saying, because I said so? You know, Jesus is a priest because I said so?
Yeah, good question.
There's just one other guy that I let this happen to, but Jesus is going to supersede him?
So an order, so I'll take them in turn. An order just means sort of a class or genus, right? So there's the order of the Levites, which just means you have to be a Levite to be one, right? An order of Melchizedek means you have to be like Melchizedek to become a Melchizedekian priest. The distinction is for a Levite for someone to be a priest on earth, the way that you become a Levite is genealogically, right?
Yeah, I get that.
For Christ to become one according to the order of Melchizedek, he's got to become like Melchizedek in some way. And the way that he did is by getting resurrected. In which case he now has an imperishable life. Which look at, and then I'll go back to your next thing. Look at 7:15. 7:15. It's even more obvious when another priest arises resembling Melchizedek, one who became a priest not on the basis of a fleshly requirement or a legal requirement concerning descent, but through the power of his indestructible life, which he got through resurrection. So then, the other part of your question is, yeah, Melchizedek, who knows how he became originally a priest? It's not in the text. He's introduced as, now Melchizedek was a priest of the Most High God. So the inference is, God just has celestial beings up there and created them at some point in history and ordained some of them to be priests.
So for me, the confusion becomes, you know more about Melchizedek because of Q
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
So everything that we look at is this book.
Uh-huh.
And so all these side things that fill it in,
Uh-huh.
it's like it's not fair unless
Oh.
somebody tells you what's there.
No. Well, sorry, maybe. But you don't have to know 11Q13, the Qumran text, to get anything I've said so far, because all of this is based on, as far as I know, based on my reading of his exegesis of Genesis 14 and Psalm 110. Because those are the two texts that he mobilizes.
Right.
This text, Hebrews, doesn't mobilize 11Q13. Doesn't, try to interpret that text. I only bring up 11Q13 because it shows that those guys were reading Genesis 14, Isaiah 61, Psalm 110 in the same way that this text was. Just provides sort of confirming evidence in that sense. But this author's argument is based on, in his own presentation of it, is based on his exegesis of Genesis 14 and Psalm 110. And then just historical facts that he knows, like Levites die, right? That sort of thing. Debbie, yep.
Okay,
And then
so
Abby.
Go back to way earlier. You
Sweet.
said the Jewish people, when they died, they just died.
Well, that's what the Sadducees thought. The Sadducees thought that, yeah. The Pharisees believed in the resurrection, yep. And the Essenes.
Oh, say that again?
A lot of Jews believed in the resurrection at the time of Jesus, yeah. Just the Sadducees didn't.
I was going to say, why were they doing all of this, trying to follow the rules and law and everything if they didn't have a reason?
Yeah.
So the resurrection was something they,
A lot of Jews, yeah. Not the Sadducees, but a lot of Jews did, yeah.
so what did they think, the ones that didn't think that? What did they think their life ended?
It's possible that they thought just simply that in a very, first answer is, I don't know and I don't think anybody knows because the Sadducees don't have written sources. The only thing we know about Sadducees is what Josephus tells us in like a couple of paragraphs and a couple of lines in the Mishnah. We just don't have Sadducean, as far as I know, we don't have any written sources from the Sadducees, and we only know about them, we know what we know about them because of little asides in like the New Testament and Josephus. So any answer I give about what motivated them psychologically is speculation. My guess is that they might have seen from a text like Deuteronomy that, well, if you live well, good things will happen to you, and if you don't, bad things happen to you. So our motivation for being obedient is having a good life. Now, right? I don't know that. I'm guessing. It'd be a reasonable inference from Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy says, hey, if you guys are obedient, then you'll have no droughts and no famine, your kids will never die, and everything else, right? And so, like, Pharisees read that and know, I think Pharisees take that corporately, like, if we as a nation obey this thing, then everything's going to go great. Not that no individual bad thing will ever happen, but just that corporately we'll do well as a nation. If we violate it as a nation, then we'll get all these bad things, exile, captivity, etc. The Sadducees, who knows? It's possible the Sadducees read that just individually. Like, okay, yeah, if I break the covenant, then my kids are going to die, and I'm going to die, and everything's we're going to all get droughted, right? I don't know. Abby, I saw your hand like 5 minutes ago.
No, I was just saying that in the passage where Abraham offers the tithe to
Yeah.
Melchizedek, he's just come back from defeating
From battle, yeah.
the
Five kings, yeah.
So, like, God helped him
Mm-hmm.
defeat those kings. It was like a kind of supernatural thing, possibly.
Presumably most battles like that are in the Bible, like, yeah.
So it makes sense that he would then pay tithe to represent
Yes, yeah.
the Most High.
Yeah, it's a gift of sort of thanksgiving. If he knew that Melchizedek is priest of the Most High God, which the text just says it, right? Then yeah, it would make sense for him to sort of give, because he calls it tenth of the spoils, right? Which is a war term. So yeah, I think that's right. Yeah,
The spoils would be given to the leader king of all the groups.
yeah, some
Even
sort of,
outside of
yeah, or like a tribute, yeah. Okay, well, this was a good review to get us back to halfway through Hebrews 7 for next time.
now it's time to go.
Because it is time to go, and I feel like if I try to pick up a new thread, then it would be, why would I do it? So that's good. This is helpful for me. I'm going to say a prayer, and then we can go down and worship. Father in heaven, thank you for this day. Thank you for this time together. Thank you for this chance to read from your scriptures and talk together and ask good, fun, interesting questions. We thank you for your many gifts. We thank you for the gift of your Son. We thank you for the gift of his intercession. We thank you for the gift of life that you give us through him. We lift up again the requests we made earlier, and we pray for your generosity and provision in all things. We love you, Lord. We trust you. Pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.